So a few months back, I bought the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in black to compare against my Garmin Fenix 7 Pro to see which is the best watch for me. Naturally though, Garmin released the Fenix 8. And so to make the choice between Apple and Garmin a fairer fight, I thought it best to pick up the Fenix 8 and use that to compare against the Apple Watch Ultra 2 to make it a fair fight so that I'm comparing the latest and greatest from both. So I'm going to compare them now. So let's start off with what's the same. The overall size for the standard watch, the 47mm, is exactly the same. Both are 47 mils. Looking at the two, we've got pretty much the same footprint there. Okay. Both have touch screens. Both have sapphire glass. Both have titanium bezels, and the backs are titanium as well, with the centers made of largely some plastic material. They both take Garmin's quick fit 22mm straps, which makes it easy to take off and put on your straps. And they both have Garmin's 5th generation heart rate sensor. I think it's called the Elevate heart rate sensor. So you get accurate heart rate readings with both watches. Just turn this over. Yeah, so you've got the Fenix 8, both 47 mils. Fenix 7, 47 mils. Both got 100 meters water resistance. They've both got a torch built into the case. So you've got that there. It's on red for this one. That one's also red at the moment. And you can cycle between different intensities of white light and the red lights, which is great. So what's changed between the two watches? Well, actually, it's quite a lot. So with the Fenix 7, all watches have MIP displays, memory and pixel displays. Basically you have a backlight, and the brighter the place is, the brighter the room is, the more brighter it is outside, the better you can see your watch. In the dark at night though, you have to use a backlight, which you can press by doing that button, and you can set the backlight to whatever intensity you like. So they're very legible in bright conditions, but you can't see the watch in the dark unless you put the backlight on. These screens also sip battery life, so this watch here will give you 19 days of battery life with the always on display on. Previously, the Epix line from Garmin had an AMOLED display, but now with the Fenix 8, all Fenix 8 standard models have an AMOLED display, which means it's much brighter. The display itself illuminates. You can change the backlight as well. It does have an always on display, but that battery life goes from 19 days up down to, well, I'm getting around 7 days from this, and that does exceed what Garmin say. Garmin say you get about 6 days, but actually with the always on display on, you're getting around 7 days. And I think 15/16 days if you use gesture mode, where the always on display is off, and when you bring your wrist up, the screen turns on. You can still get the Fenix 8, an MIP display with a solar and sapphire like this one. But I've been loving the bright, vibrant Apple Watch Ultra screen, and I thought, well, the screen on here was one of the reasons that I was actually thinking of changing, because it's quite dull and it's quite dim, and the colors aren't nice and punchy, whereas this is a very, very bright, vibrant display and it looks brilliant. So yeah, main drawback though of that is you lose roughly 12-13 days worth of battery life overall, unless you leave the always on display mode off. Compared with the 2 days of this, still great, but yeah, much lower battery life. The next change is the size of the display. The Fenix 7 has a 1.3-inch display with a solar ring around the edge, which is quite difficult to see, but there's a sort of reddish tinge around the edge. This one is 1.4 inches and looks noticeably bigger. Doesn't sound like a lot in practice, 0.1 of an inch, but actually, yeah, it's quite a big change overall. The screen definitely does look a lot bigger. The side effect of that is the titanium bezel around the watch, where the Fenix 7 has quite like a traditional dive watch look. The Fenix 8's got a much thinner titanium bezel. It's got a much more contemporary look, I think, which is ironic because the Fenix 8 is now dive certified, even though the Fenix 7 isn't. So it's dive certified to 40 meters depth, so you can use it as a diving computer for up to 40 meters depth. Part of the reason to achieve this is that part of the way that Garmin have achieved this, is by changing the buttons. So the buttons on the Fenix 8 are not actually real buttons; they're capacitive buttons, meaning that it's not a physical moving part where water can get in. Whereas on the Fenix 7, they're physical buttons, which in reality, the buttons on the Fenix 8 are horrible. They're mushy, they don't necessarily always register presses. Sometimes when I'm trying to do a double press to switch the torch on, it doesn't always work straight away, but I get it. You know what? It's much more water resistant this way, so it's good, but the buttons were far, far better and are far, far better on the Fenix 7. They got Fenix 7 Pro, in fact. They just got a much more satisfying press. You can feel the actual press going in, whereas this is just like smushing something in. It doesn't really have that click, which this display does. I mean, you saw just there, I pressed this button and nothing happened. Whereas so sometimes, yeah, it's not great. Yeah, the 7 Pro's buttons are definitely more confident and satisfying, and yeah, I think Fenix 9, Fenix 8 Pro, whatever it might be, Garmin needs to sort of improve these for sure. Another thing that Garmin have managed to do between the two watches is they've actually managed to slim down the Fenix 8 down to 13.8 millimeters versus 14.5 millimeters from the 7 Pro. It's nice. Does mean that the watch sits a bit flatter to the wrist when you're wearing it, and also has a little bit more chance of fitting underneath the shirt cuff. Whereas this, often you'd find the shirt cuff is hitting the side of the watch. This does seem to sort of slide over a little bit better. Another thing that Garmin have added is a microphone and a speaker. And you might be thinking, why would you want a microphone and a speaker on a watch? Well, it's actually come in really handy with my Apple Watch. I've got young kids, got a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, and sometimes I'm carrying the 1-year-old. Sometimes I'm carrying the 5-year-old as well. Not sure how long that will last. But sometimes your hands are full, and it's quite easy to just kind of click the answer button on the watch, quickly talk into the watch for a quick call if you just have to. Usually that's my wife trying to figure out where I am, why I'm not back yet, etc, etc. But yeah, it's quite handy and quite useful. Another thing that having a microphone and speaker enables on the watch is you've got a voice assistant now built into the watch. So you can press and hold on the start activity button and it opens the on-device assistant. You can ask it to set a timer, you can ask it to start an activity, a few other bits and pieces. Most of the time I'm just using that to set a timer. I don't really tend to use that for anything else. But another side effect is it can actually tap into the voice assistant on your phone. And what that means is I've set up a different shortcut, which is the bottom left button, which is normally for music. And what that does means that I've got Siri basically on the watch via my phone. So to use Siri, which is great, you just press and hold this button the way I've set it up, and Siri will start working on the phone. There you go. Apple Intelligence on a Garmin watch, sort of. But it is helpful for, I tend to use Siri to set reminders, to add things to my shopping list, that kind of thing. That's all included on there. I tend to use Siri for shopping lists and reminders, that kind of thing. So having it on the watch is quite handy. If your phone's somewhere else in the house, it's quite handy. So yeah, those are the main differences that I found between the 7 and the 8. Overall, I do like the 8 better. I wish it had the battery life of the 7, but I prefer this display overall. So yeah. The look also, I guess the 8 looks more contemporary. This looks a bit more traditional. I guess this does look a little bit more dated now in comparison to the 8. And the 8 definitely has a bigger presence because of that larger screen. But yeah, otherwise, very similar watches, but still quite a few differences. Anyway, hope you liked the video. Thanks.